And each time that I'm doing a run, like I'm explaining a lot of the same stuff. There's so many things that are in these games that I can go through 2 or 3 runs in a row and not hit everything, because there's a lot of things that it's just hard to fit in. Because usually the different tricks are very close together, so I get through explaining one and then I get to a new place. Hopefully we get a PB here. My goal is to get 130.45 or below. It's easily doable. My last few PBs have had some pretty major mistakes, so I know it's easily doable. And yeah, hopefully this time we get a PB. Alright, so in the nature of trying to do this like a marathon, we're going to go ahead and explain a couple things about the run. We are running Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, or as it's known in Japan, Biohazard 7 Resident Evil. And you'll notice that we are in the Japanese language. The reason why... no, we don't stop the timer. The timer that I have listed on my, like, right below me right here, that's just there for me to look at. I can kind of gauge how I'm doing mostly by seeing that. It also helps for I don't know, like seeing somebody's going to verify, they can see that I'm not doing some weird splicing or whatever on the video. And I know it's not covering up the game video at all, but I don't know, it's something that could kind of help if they're trying to figure out if I'm doing something weird. But yeah, the RTA timer that's there is just there for my convenience. It's not really there for the run. There's a couple of the DLC categories that are RTA, so in those I would start them up, but even in those sequences, like, you still have to have the timer running even through cutscenes and things of that sort. But that's what's going on there, because as Poochie mentioned, all of the runs for pretty much all the Resident Evil games, they go by the in-game timer, because at the end of the game you see the time on the in-game result screen. So as I mentioned, we're doing we have the game in Japanese, and it doesn't matter what version of the game you own. If you play in Japanese or a handful of the other languages that are not English, you're gonna save at least 1 second of time. And I know it's like insane, we're doing it to save a second, but in speedrunning, every second counts. So as you watch, you're gonna notice most of the areas that we're in, we kind of try to stay close to the walls and keep our turning tight. Movement's very important in this run. When I went from just kind of running around and I had wide turns and I was on a lower controller sensitivity and all that, my time was kind of far off. When I took a couple of days to get used to the faster sensitivity and I really focused on working on my my movement speed, I cut at least a minute. It was like a minute to a minute and a half just doing that. I still had the same crap boss strats that I was using at the time. All of that other stuff was the same, but just working on movement saved a decent chunk of time. So here we're coming up on our first trick, if you want to call it that. Where this autosave icon pops up, we're going to hit retry. And because the game is run via, or like verified via in-game time, when we come back, the in-game timer's paused during the majority of this load screen. At the very end of that load screen, just before we're allowed to hit circle on the Japanese version, or X on every other version, the timer starts back up, and we lose just like a slight bit of time to that timer. But these retries, what they're doing, this one, the 2 in the guest house and the 1 in the salt mines that we use on console, they make the game forget that we're supposed to be moving at a slower pace. So the time that we lose because of that couple of seconds that we can't do anything while we're waiting to be able to hit enter to get out of the load screen, that all gets made up for by the movement speed that we gain. On PC they have like 9 or 10, depending on who the runner is, different retries, and those do a myriad of different things. Most of those time saves are like 1 second or 2 seconds, but their load screens are pretty much instant, so it actually saves that time for them as opposed to making them lose time. So that's why we don't use most of them on console. And some of what they do is like it teleports them to different areas of the map. Some of it is it makes certain enemies easier to kill. We'll explain right here. The reason why I pressed up against that wall and had my camera facing the wall like that is there's normally a body that pops out of the water, and it will cause you to stumble backwards and lose a few seconds from your time. By forcing ourselves up against the wall that way, it skips that and causes the body to never spawn. You still get the sound of the bubbles that would happen during that body raising out of the water, but it doesn't actually happen. If it did, like if the body actually spawned, I think it would still, even though we're not looking at it, I think it would still cause us to lose time, just because like you can't run around it once it pops up. If you actually have it trigger, you'd have to go like the long way around, so it kind of doing that little bit of a trick helps quite a bit. So right here, we can't get around Mia. There's no way to walk around her, so we're kind of in an auto scroller, but it gives us time to get our menuing ready. So we're gonna delete this email that Mia sent us and move our cursor to the left side of these bolt cutters. I don't want to move the bolt cutters, and I want to make sure that that menu slot that's right here stays empty, so that I can pick up an item and it's going to drop into that slot as opposed to going elsewhere in my menu. I want it there because my movement during the time that I'm going to use that item is going to be going left, so I can hold left on my analog stick. When I open the menu to use that fuse later on, it's going to just automatically push my menu or that cursor over to that spot. It's just kind of setting that menuing up. As I mentioned before, the movement is important in saving time in this run. Your menuing is also very important. So here's a fun little thing that can happen as well. If you're standing to the side of Mia, her mouth will not move. If you walk in front of her, you'll see her start talking again. But if I come back to the side, her mouth's going to get stuck in whatever position it was in. That's a great one right there. But her mouth gets stuck in whatever position it was last in. And I don't know for a fact, but I'm making an assumption that what happened there is the developers didn't expect somebody to be standing next to her when she was talking, so they didn't program in like the animation to happen when you're like if you're trying to see it from the side. So yeah, so instead of the mouth moving to a default position or something like that, it just stays in whatever position it was last in. And kind of cracks me up a little bit. And as you saw, like it goes back to moving normal as soon as you get through that area. But just that little section, it happens. So here we're gonna have this this next trigger. If we're not able to see out into that room at all, and we're next to this pillar, you're gonna hear two tones, like two piano tones here in a moment, and in just over 4 seconds after that second tone right there, Mia's gonna be grabbed and we're gonna be able to move. If you actually wait until you hear her yell out, and if you wait until you hear her yell, it's a little bit longer than that, just over 4 seconds. But if you try to jump that trigger, it's like 4.2 seconds is the actual time on it. And if you try to jump it, you can go before she actually gets grabbed. It's just very risky, and it can lose you a few seconds if you go even, just like 50 milliseconds too quick will cause you to lose quite a bit of time. So right during this part, we don't actually have to like press any buttons until I stand up here in a second. When Ethan stands up, we run towards Mia so we can start the animation of getting stabbed quicker. And that's the only thing that we have to worry about for now. I don't have to press any buttons until she knocks herself out. This whole thing's just one long animation. She found you! So here in a moment, as I mentioned a second ago, Mia's gonna knock herself out. When she does that, Ethan's gonna stand up, and when we get control of Ethan again, we have 10 seconds until we can hit a trigger that makes Mia stand back up and start the next fight. If we do this next thing, which is the perfect trigger trick, we can be in position to make that happen really quickly. So if we look at the trim and then strafe over like 2, 3, 4, 5, like 5 little short strafes, sometimes 6 depending on if I went too short. After 10 seconds we'll be right in position so that we don't have to wait to get pulled into that animation, and we're not in the bubble that keeps that keeps her from raising back up. So during this Mia 1 fight, there's a few hits that you gotta put on her, and then if we hit block, we'll immediately throw her off. So you'll see some people like punch her once she grabs a hold of you a couple of times, and that's because they're trying to do more damage. But if you hit block, you skip all of that and you go straight to throwing her off of you. Ideally, that fight would be a one hit or one swing. You would get an extra hit or two from getting some clips. That clipping with the axe will hit her a couple times. That's like the most ideal situation. The most common is that you can get a 2-hit on her. As long as you swing with 2 strong hits on that fight, that's usually enough to make that fight end. That left to right swing that happens isn't as strong as a right to left, so that's why I did a third hit during that fight. So as soon as we pass that door, the open door there, that's where the next autosave icon popped up, and it gave us the ability to use another one of our retries. This is one of the other areas where the game again forgets that we're supposed to be moving slower, and our movement speed is increased kind of considerably. So earlier when I was talking about my menuing, the reason why I put it on the left side of the bolt cutters is because obviously we needed to use it here. And that fuse that I just picked up went into that slot to the left of the bolt cutters. Now when we walk into this room, as I was mentioning before, our movement's going to be moving to the left. So right there I was able to just open my menu and immediately be able to use that fuse. I didn't have to like think about moving my menu. Now, I run on the super censored Japanese Zero D version of Resident Evil 7. And right here is going to be the first moment in the game that censorship actually does anything. And it's not something this doesn't really save any time on a run, or it doesn't change the timing of the run at all. But this is the first time that you actually get to witness that censorship. The reason why we run on the Zero D version of the game is that later censorship actually changes some of the animations up, and those animation changes cause us to save a decent chunk of time. Over the course of the entire run, it saves about 25 seconds over a non-censored version of the game. So as you see, we get to keep our hand. Normally, in all other versions of the game, Ethan loses his hand. There's a second Japanese version called the Zero Z rated version, and its name is the grotesque version, if you've ever heard of that one. And it still has censorship, but it doesn't have as much. There's just some things that they don't allow at all, so it's a slightly different version than even this is. Now here we're coming up on the Mia 2 fight. This fight relies on getting a clipped hit. I didn't get it as well as I could have. That's the end of that fight. And that's not terrible. 1430 is not a bad time for guest house. My best guest house time is 1426, and the world record holder has a 1419 guest house. That's actually the best that anybody's done. So we're not crazy behind. I think in my PB, I'm actually at like 1431 or 1432. So I think we're ahead a little bit on PB time. I'm actually not the greatest at the Mia 2 fight. It's one of my biggest weaknesses in a run. There's a very specific spot that you have to be standing to get the best clipped hit, and when you get it right, like when I hit her the first time, you only really heard like one hit, maybe two come out of that. If you get that hit right, the best way I could explain it is it's like a crunchy noise because you'll hear it hit multiple times. And then if you get that first clipped hit in very well, there's a slight movement you can do to come up back on her and get another decent clipped hit. And the best that you can do on console is what we call two-hit Mia. On PC, because of the variable frame rate, they can do a one-hit Mia where that initial hit will kill her immediately. So there's a few differences that we get. It's part of what makes PC and console times track differently on speedrun.com. But typically I'll get like a 4, 5, or 6 hit Mia. Like I said, I'm not extremely consistent with it. I've been trying to work on that fight more, and I don't know, I feel like I'm like 60-40. 60% of the time I get it bad. 40% of the time I get okay. During the rest of this run, I'm a little bit more consistent with some of these fights. But like I said right before I started this run, I'm not as consistent as some of the other guys, and that's part of why they're as far ahead of me as they are right now. I usually will mess up one of the boss fights that I never mess up if I do good in the guest house. So here we've gotten to meet our new family. That's Marguerite. We call her Marge. We've got Jack and Lucas. As you'll notice, Lucas still has his arm. That's another one of those Zero D censorship things. Basically what Zero D does is it gets rid of every time something gets cut off of a person. If you're unlucky enough to have your leg cut off, that even gets, like, you don't have your leg cut off by Jack either, or any of the other enemies that would normally do that to you. That whole thing, you'll still go through the animation of it. You still have to heal like you had your leg cut off, but you don't have to actually reattach the leg. It's still there. So right here we're gonna have the Jack hallway, and this part of the game is it feels random, but really it just comes down to the way that you're looking and moving as you approach this table. If you're doing it right, Jack won't grab you. I was not doing it right, so I got grabbed by Jack. Now, after we get a hold of that, we have to come down here and just touch that door. If we don't do it, then we're going to miss a quick trigger for the deputy that's coming up, because we would have to run all the way back down this hallway in order to make the deputy appear. And when we get to that in a moment, you're going to see what I get to do instead of running all the way back down the hallway. Overall, that wasn't a terrible Jack hallway. Ideally, we would have been able to get around him without getting that first grab, but a lot of times when you miss that first grab, he'll quickly grab you a second time and throw you down the wrong way, so you'll have to kind of run back around him again, and it kind of sucks. He also has the ability to stab you with the shovel, which is like a really long animation, and we kind of missed out on all of that, so I'm kind of happy with that. Now by trying to open that door, it triggered this phone to ring, and as I approached the phone, you kind of notice I went a little to the left of it and moved towards the right. The reason I did that is that if you run straight at it and try to answer the phone, you're probably going to pick that map up that's right there because of how close the icon is to the phone. Now next up, we're going to get our New Game Plus items out of this box. What you noticed was when we opened the box up, it basically is announcing that you have New Game Plus items. Now, how I walked into that kitchen and ran into that beam, that's what triggers this deputy, because I already touched that door down on the other side of that hallway. Had I not touched the aux door at the end of the hallway, I would have, like I said before, had to run all the way back down there, get to that door, and then run all the way back. So it cuts out a significant amount of time by just going ahead and doing it during that initial part with Jack. So I mentioned that I was picking up New Game Plus items. The New Game Plus is basically just means that we are using unlocked items from previous playthroughs. If we were doing New Game, it would mean that we would have to do everything like it was a fresh run of the game, like you just put the game in for the first time and you've never played it before. Those items that we picked up are a very powerful pistol called the Albert 01R, a circular saw that does just a ton of damage, and infinite ammo, which makes everything just so much easier. And then there's also the walking shoes. The walking shoes, for all the things that you would think they do, all that they really do is make it to where when you are crouched and moving, you move at the same speed that you would standing up. That's really all that they do, but it does save time, even for a couple of really quick little pass-throughs and some small doors that we'll see later on. So right here is going to be one of the things that changes in CRD. The deputy's not going to lose the top of his head, which affects something later on. And then after he gets killed, instead of beating his body, Jack's going to grab that shovel that's up on that shelf, which is going to change his position in the garage. And it makes this fight go about a second to a second and a half quicker than it does on the regular version of the game. The reason we shoot him there is as soon as he destroys that shelf, that damage makes him go straight to grab that door, or yeah, grab the door and get in the car, and it just makes it makes the whole fight go quicker. And then that location that I was standing in is very, very specific because we have to time that shot and we have to be in the right place for it, because if we don't hit that shot at the right time, just like a half second too early or too late, we're gonna hit Jack's invincibility frames and he's just gonna wreck into the wall and then back up. If he backs up, shooting him, getting that headshot after that doesn't guarantee that he's gonna die on the second hit. You might have to shoot him a couple of times because of the fact that he's regened some of his health since that shot right before he got in the car. Now, when we get up here, we're going to do that quick turn pickup. And the reason why we are doing that is because that picture frame that has the aux in it, if we don't do it, then we have to manually turn that picture frame around, and that adds a couple of seconds because it's slow on console. On PC, they don't have to do all that because the mouse sensitivity makes any of the things that you have to turn, like shadow puzzles or that frame, you can do it incredibly quick. But on console, it takes time. So by doing that quick pickup, we were able to pick the item up and be looking at the back of it immediately. And then you may have noticed that I did another quick turn to look back at the shelf, and by pressing the X button to start the shelf animation, like the moving that shelf animation, it actually cancels the end of the quick turn animation and lets us get to moving the shelf quicker as well. So right here is another use of the quick pickup. By grabbing this and doing quick pickup at the same time, it lets us get to this animation quicker. Otherwise, I just have to do the controller sensitivity and turn around and look. So here we're going to shoot Jack in his leg, and hit that stumble there is going to cause him to stay up there just long enough to let us get this pendulum put into this clock, move our menu to the shadow puzzle, and grab this dog head. Those 3 shots I took before were to get his attention so he knew I was down here, and those shots are to get his attention so that he starts to follow us down this hall. If we didn't do all that, Jack would bust through this wall right here, and when he busts through that wall, it's going to add like 8 seconds to our run. That last shot that I just took on him let me get to this pedestal without having to worry about Jack keeping us from being able to use the shadow puzzle. If he is too close to us, it won't let us use it, and you can lose 30 seconds or more trying to kill him to be able to start that shadow puzzle up. So there's a lot of complexity in a very short amount of time, just a lot of things that you have to pull off all at once. We get a little bit of a breather for a moment during this section because we're just kind of trying to get into the basement, which is probably the most common type of basement you'll ever see. A basement in a swamp that has the most useful rooms that anybody in any American household needs. So coming around this corner here, we're going to have our first molded in the basement, and another one standing here. And this normally is a puzzle that you would have to figure out how to get this one unlocked. Basically, behind, like when you come in that door, there's a note on the wall that says the last one in the red hand or something like that. It's not a difficult puzzle at all. I barely want to call it a puzzle because it's not really, but since I was reloading, that took an extra moment for it to let me open the door. I knew I should not have done that, but I did. But anyways, like I said, that was a little bit of a puzzle that that kind of exists. So here we're coming up on the Jack 2 boss fight. I messed this one up a little bit because everything's got to be down to just, it's like a few frames that you have to get this first shot off. There's a safe strat that you can do, but you end up losing the same time that you would if you mess this up. So I have to wait until his iframes go away here. And I missed his iframes, so we're going to go ahead and hit him like this. Alright, now we're going to get away from him. If you shoot too early like that, obviously, I did not get him out of iframes. And the reason I had to wait on that shot is, again, because of iframes. Those invincibility frames are all over this game, to the point where every enemy in the game has invincibility frames. There's not a single enemy that you can go against that doesn't have them. Most of the time, they load in early enough that we don't have to worry about them for most of the molded, but even just your regular molded, whenever they're loading into the game, they have invincibility frames, especially if there's an animation. So, you know, when we went and we're waiting on him to tear down the fence back there, I moved my menu cursor over one slot to where the chainsaw ended up filling in. And the reason for that is that after we use the chainsaw to open that door up, we lose that chainsaw. So it makes that item slot available for us to be able to have that key put into it. So now I don't have to move my menu to use that key here in a moment. Now, one thing about that Jack 2 fight is that the censorship actually saves you time on that fight as well. On all other versions of the game, there's an extra 10 seconds because the upper half of Jack's body explodes and then his legs kind of stumble forward a few steps. It takes 10 seconds for those legs to fall, and you have to wait for that animation to end before you're able to use the chainsaw. On this version, because the body is not allowed to be in pieces and it has to stay a whole body, we actually just get to save those 10 seconds over. Well, the 0Z version also has that same time save in it, but that's... Or no, 0Z doesn't have that one in it either. I'm sorry. So that's actually a time save over all other versions of the game as well. So much to talk about in the beginning of this game. Alright, so when I entered the trailer here, I kind of came in at an angle and then moved backwards. Exiting the trailer is what causes the phone to ring, but the reason why we came in at an angle as opposed to running straight in is that if you're running straight forward and then you try to go straight backwards, you actually have to wait. Like the character pauses for a second before he starts moving again. So by coming in at that angle, we skipped that 1 second pause. So this next area we're going to is the old house, and right off the bat when we get in here, we're going to have a trick that's used. It's mostly used on the PlayStation, on PS4. It happens on the Xbox as well, but not nearly as often. But right here, we're going to pause the game. Now this black screen that's popping up is a load screen that's happening because the game's not able to keep up with how quick we're moving through the zone. So in order to save our in-game time, because we can't be for certain that the in-game timer does or does not stop there, we pause, because pausing the game definitely stops the in-game timer. Now, when we get control of Ethan after this little animation here, if we have the saw ready to go and we're staring right here, we immediately can kill all of the spiders that are on that door and run straight through it. We don't have to wait and try to kill off all of them. If you wait and you have like the wrong weapon out or anything like that, you have to like move up and down with the saw to kill all of those spiders before you're able to get through the door. Because if any of them are still on the door, it will just kind of make you back up, and you have to try to, I don't know, he's like tries to slap all the spiders off of them or something like that. But having that saw ready to go, the moment they start coming through, you pretty much kill them all before they can spread out. Now, once we leave this little crawl space, I don't know if it's crawl space, we're going to get to an actual crawl space, which is funny because there's like a flood over here, but yet we can go underneath the house over here. I don't understand that. But this is one of those areas that those walking shoes I was talking about earlier is a big benefit, because if you notice the movement speed compared to the movement speed when we were trying to escape Jack earlier, it's considerably quicker. There's really only one more spot that the walking shoes are going to matter for us, at least in any percent. In the 100% category, there's an extra one that it's a nice little save, but in this category there's only one more time that it's necessary, and it's not like a crazy time save that you're going to get from the next one. It's like 600 milliseconds over the course of two times going through the same door, but it is a time save. So you'll notice back there that I ran just right by Marguerite and she didn't say anything to me or do anything to me. And that's just because on easy, the enemies take a little bit longer to see you. And by utilizing that information, we're able to just run around her without her throwing her bugs at us. If she threw the bugs at us, we would have to close that door and get rid of them before we could start to use that crank. Because if you get hit by something while trying to use the crank, it knocks you out of it, and you'd have to restart. So here we're going to get up to our first Marge fight. This is the Marge 1 boss fight. And we do this fight by doing one shot with the Albert pistol, and then we use quick shot on the G17 pistol. So we're going to do this real quick, and then I'll try to explain what that is. Yeah, we kind of missed a shot or two there, so I took an extra one or two. Normally it's just the one shot with the Albert and then 3 shots with that other pistol. And what the quick shot is where you alternate between hip fire and aimed fire with the G17. If you shoot normal and just like spam the trigger button to fire from the hip or fire from being aimed, it fires at a consistent rate of like 1 shot per second. By alternating back and forth, you pretty much get it to where you're at like a shot every half a second. Now I missed the quick pickup on that box back there, and while it's not picking up an item, it's one of those situations where after reading that note, we need to be turned around so that we can run straight over here. It's only like, it's not even a half a second worth of time that you're going to lose there, but it's just one of those situations where using the quick pickup can save you that little half a second. So after we get through all of this fun stuff, we're going to go out to the Marge 2 fight. Before we get there, when we walked up those stairs in the top of the old house, and we stood just at the top of the steps and stared at that door for the 1 second that we were there, that is what made the black goop that sits at the bottom of that pit back there go away. We used to think that you had to run all the way to the door, or that you had to run far enough to see the use icon on the lantern trap or lantern trick there, and we just somebody, I want to say it was Sarthex, but I don't remember for certain if it was him, found that if you just stand at the top of those stairs for 1 second and stare at the door, it triggers the mold to go away in the bottom of the pit. So right here is the Marge 2 boss fight, and it takes those 3 shots and then quick shotting all of those. We pull our saw out, and by staring at this hole as we walk into the room, it manipulates her spawn position so that she goes into that corner. By hitting all of those shots and doing everything we did, it lets that fight end that quickly. Itchy viewer, thank you for the follow. Welcome to the Z-Stream fam. Always love getting another follower. So after that quick boss fight, which that strat was both me and Ross Rossi developed that one together. We were working on that, both streaming all kinds of attempts and trying different things. It actually combined 2 different strats that were being used at the time. We found that to be the quickest way. If you miss a couple, you can miss like 1 shot with your G17, and recently I found out that if you miss the first shot with your Albert, but you land all the rest of them, you can still pull that off. But there's also a lot of other variables. Like when she popped out of the hole, if I was standing too far to the left side of her instead of in front of her, I could accidentally do too much damage to the little bug sack thing that she has, which is her weak spot. And if you do too much damage and cause that to bust before she before she jumps back, you'll actually add like 8 seconds to your run, because she will she'll end up jumping to the ceiling, and there's a whole extra animation where you have to wait on her to jump back down because you can't knock her off of the ceiling. And if you do knock her off with like a gunshot or something, it adds more time because she'll flail around on the ground. When I said you couldn't knock her off, I meant with like the saw. You can actually saw her while she's up there, but she stays up there. So earlier I was mentioning getting through a door and it being like 600 milliseconds that you're saving because of the walking shoes. This is the little door that I was talking about. I opened it up a little slower than what I needed to. Normally it would have been fully open so we could have gone through it a little quicker. but that right there is the little 300 millisecond time save times 2. Now, right there is one of those places that I was mentioning that PC has additional retries. They would have, as they came back out of that little door, they would have hit retry when the autosave icon popped up, and what that would have done is it would have made that enemy a one-shot kill rather than a 2-shot. We can't use that one on console because we lose too much time to the load screen. Since loads are nearly instant on PC, they're able to do it and they don't lose any time. And it only saves you 1 second because the time that you're saving isn't because of movement speed, it's not because of your being teleported to a different area of the room. It's strictly because you don't have to take the extra shot and wait that extra second on the enemy to die. So normally when you come to get this next phone call, you have to go into the trailer there. But we found that the trigger is just, the box for it was a little bit bigger than the trailer is, and you can just run up against that corner and it'll trigger the phone to ring, which means that the next area of the game loads. So when we run down here, we're going to come up to another part where I'm going to pause the game, because right here we're going to get another black screen. Again, this is mostly a PlayStation 4 problem. I'm not certain if it still happens on the Pro. I believe it does. I'd have to ask Phil. He's one of the other runners of this game. He's the one that currently shows for 3rd place on Speedrun.com. Oh yeah, I don't have to wait on the door that time. And he's played on a Pro, and I can't remember if it saves time or not. I haven't been able to purchase one. Now right there, there's a chance to get around him without getting hit or getting blocked by him. I missed it, but it happens. And that room right there, grabbing that key, when I mentioned earlier at the Jack 1 boss fight that the deputy's head doesn't get cut off, and that's going to save us some time later, normally in that room, there's a it ends up taking about 13 seconds total, but there's an animation where you pull that key out of the deputy's esophagus from his decapitated head. It's kind of gross, but that does not exist in this censored version of the game. So it's another area where we get to save time due to censorship. And it's actually, that's the last time that there's like a time save because of the Cerity version. Whew. So after all of that, we're going to come up into this attic and we're going to get to the last of the shadow puzzles. This shadow puzzle is the most precise. You have to be pretty much 100% on point when you do it. If you're off slightly, you're just going to miss, and it takes a moment to be able to try again. So you want to line it up, even if it takes you an extra like half a second to try to make sure that everything's perfect. It's better than losing a second or more, because you're making attempts where you then have to wait to be able to adjust it. Another fun little thing about the game, the sign, the little label underneath of the painting that you're trying to line that up on says Judgment. They forgot to put the E on it. It's just something that we noticed, or that I noticed recently. I have a very funny thing that happened on this clock. There's a DLC for this game where you have to put a time into this clock, and I came back to running the main game after a while of doing that DLC instead, and completely blanked out on what the time was that you had to set the clock to. So one other thing that just happened, normally when you go to drop down below where the bed was at, you can avoid that second drop that happened. I just missed it a little bit. If you are pressed as far into the corner where between the wall and the bed as possible when you start to drop, as you turn left, it'll let you skip having to do that extra drop. It's like a half second that you save by doing it, but again, it's whatever you want it to be. You know, if you're trying to save all the frames, half a second's a lot of time. So in this part, as long as we get a shot, we don't have to kill that first crawler, but as long as we get a shot on him, we can get all the way over to that door without getting hit. If they happen to get really close to you, normally they'll despawn when you get to the stairs. I've had one time ever, 43-43. It's not too bad. Considering we had a terrible Jack 2 fight, it's not too bad. I think it's PB pace actually. As long as I don't mess up anything else. I should never say that though, because that's when I screw things up. So, right here, this video has where he said Ethan, and then he said Ethan the second time there. There's a possibility, it's a very, very small possibility, like astronomically small possibility, that the game could glitch out and the TV will bust. At the end of the video it's going to do that, but there's been a couple of recorded cases, just a couple of streams that have been on Twitch. One of them is from a speedrunner, and one of them was from a casual, just somebody playing the game back when it first came out, where that TV busted when he said Ethan the second time, and that just let the player get up and continue on through the game. Those are the only 2 times that we've ever seen it, and both times it was on a PlayStation 4. Obviously PlayStation 4 has loading issues in this game, so I'm sure some sort of bug that had to do with the loading, maybe a hardware issue, was the reason for it. But if we were able to find a way to make that something that we could actually force to happen in a run, that would give us like a nice 2-minute save on the game, because this video is about 2 minutes long. We sit here for a while watching this, so if we could get rid of that, that would be awesome. But so far, I've tried a lot of things to see if there's a way to make it happen, and so far I've not been able to find a way to trigger it forcefully. If I ever find it, that's gonna be like the biggest find for this game, because right now there's not really any real glitches that save a lot of time. There is out of bounds, but well, they're on PS4, so they can't change really their settings. So this section here is kind of like a Saw-like section, where there's all these trip mines set up that we have to do. Now that shot that I just got coming through that door is pretty insane. There's only me and one other person that have actually done that on console. It's hard to hit that. It's pretty nuts to get that trip mine. And so walking through that door, you notice that I ran all the way up against the right door frame, and the reason for that is if you try to go anywhere but up against that frame, you'll actually blow yourself up even if you're blocking, because there's bombs on both sides of you, and you just barely get underneath of it if you're pushed all the way up against that side. Now here we're going to skip putting anything in, because nothing that we put in is going to work. We're going to pull the circular saw out before we start putting items away, because basically we're going to need the circular saw later, and I don't want it sitting at the top of my box when everything else is at the bottom. It just makes it to where I can get to it quicker when I pull my items back out. The next section, after we fight the fat molded here in a moment, we have to have our menu 100% empty, and the 3 items that I kept, I'm able to, I won't say delete, but I can send them back to the box without having to be at the box. So that's why I kept those 3 items, and that way I don't have to lose any time by going back to that box. I'm having a moment where I don't remember if I menued for this or not. I wouldn't be surprised if I forgot to, but I feel like I did. Worst case scenario, I'll just have the sound of a click when I go to use it. I did menu it. Yay! I used to never menu that, I always forgot to. So this fight here is kind of random. I don't want to call it random, because pretty much everything in the game is... I don't want to say everything, but there's a lot of stuff that's pretty on point and it's pretty consistent. Now this here, we actually got the quick kill on him, I don't know if the quick kill actually saves you any time, because the amount of time that you have to wait for this button compared to getting a normal kill speed on him, and it's more about his death animation. Like, he'll die at the same time, but since he like falls and explodes immediately when you knock his leg out from underneath of him, like, he just disappears, as opposed to when you kill him in the same 2 shots and he doesn't have his leg disappear. He has a slow fall and then eventual explosion. It's not clear if we're actually saving any time for it, but as long as I don't know, the possibility's there, why not go for the quick kill? So right here is when I would have had to have gone over to that box if I hadn't put those items or deleted those items. But because I did, I was able to just come over here and use this keypad. And if you noticed, while I was using that keypad, the sound effects for it are the same sound effects as the original Resident Evil menu. Like if you were moving around in the menu. It's just one of those fun little Easter egg kind of things they put in. Now, we can't do anything until after he starts talking, so I don't know, we just like take a little shower before we get started in this area. Stop being so dirty. Yeah, and then we're going to go ahead and light this candle, and after we do this, we're going to run over to a door and burn a rope off, and while that rope is burning, we're going to do a menu. The next room that we go into, there's going to be a combination lock that we're going to do, and when I'm doing that, I'm going to be really quiet, because every time I talk through that, I always mess it up. So I'm going to be silent here in just a second for a couple moments. Alright, that's really simple. Like, no matter what it is, it's always 5. So you can either roll it up or down, and it's 5 no matter what. It's one of the easiest little combination puzzles in any game, but like I said, every time that I talk while I'm doing it, I always mess it up because I miscount or something. So after all that, all my menuing was set up so that after I used that valve a moment ago, I could just hold forward as I approached that stove top to be able to relight this candle, and it would automatically move my menuing back up to where the candle was at. And then when we come over here, we used to go ahead right now and grab the boards and start to get rid of them, but by waiting and then putting this, going to put the bomb in the wall, the timer on the bomb's not actually accurate. The wall's gonna explode before the bomb is actually ready to do it. If you actually watch that countdown timer and time it out, that's actually how it works out. So here in a moment, we're gonna run through this area, and as long as we don't get any blowback and we can move through immediately. I was a little bit slow, so I had like a couple seconds worth of slowdown there. But if you're right on top of it and you start moving right off the bat, you can get through there without being slowed down at all by the smoke. Because you get like this coughing animation, and Ethan raises his hands up, which is what you got to see at the end of that. Now earlier when I was putting all of those items back in the box, and I put away the keys and then the knife, and then I put the crank in first, and then all the other items in whatever order I wanted to. The reason I did that was so that the crank, no matter what, was going to be 2 menu movements down from where my cursor was going to be at when I got to that crank. And I would love to be able to have been menued to the right place ahead of time, but every time that you get into a box, the next time that you use your menu, your cursor's in the top left-hand corner of your inventory. So I was going to have to move no matter what. Any other position was going to put me to where the crank was going to be more than 1 movement. So by putting it just 2 down, I don't have to think about like down and right or whatever. I could pick up some things in a different way, but it takes more time to do it. Now this guy, as I mentioned, like every enemy has invincibility frames. When that crawler pops out of the water, he's invincible until you're already like halfway around him, which is why I waited to try to shoot him until I was halfway through where he was at. Had I gone any earlier than that to try to shoot him, it would have done absolutely nothing. Probably would have put us in a position where we got hit instead of making that shot, just because the amount of time it would take to for the second shot to happen would have given him a chance to hit us. So here I menu my gun over just because it's where I'm used to it being at, and we're going to have to use it during this fight. And then I put my cursor here because here in a few minutes when we take control of Mia, that's where the fuse is going to end up being at. There we go. Now, this is the Jack 3 boss fight. Everything about this fight is pretty specific if you want to be optimal with it. We're going to shoot him in the eye, which is going to make it easier to pop that eye later on with the saw. And then we're going to try to shoot from above the eye that's underneath of his tail, because that's the hardest one to get once you're actually below. It's easier to get while we're up here, because we just got it there. It's easier to hit from above than it is here, because the hitbox for what's not the eye around that part of the tail is much larger. Now this one that's above him has a ton of invincibility frames that we have to deal with, which is why that took forever to hit. And as you saw, the eye that was on his face, like I said, by shooting him while we were upstairs, it made that eye go down really quick. If we get a shot or two on this, it makes this one go faster. And that was actually a really fast Jack 3. That was a really quick one. I'll have to check my ResidentEvil.net time to see if it changed at all, because that was really pretty quick. If I would have got a second shot on it while it was on his eye, on his back while he was kind of bent over. I don't have to get that because I don't have any health issues. If I would have got that second shot, it would have probably been like a quarter of a second quicker. But it tracks to that kind of precision on ResidentEvil.net, so like I said, I'll have to see if that was my fastest or not, because that was insanely quick. Alright, so here we're going to end Jack, and 55, 57. That's really, I'm on a PB pace right now. I'm just going to put that one out there. In my 130.54, I was at 56.04 right here, and that was like a second or two late when I hit the button for that. So, and in my actual 130.50 PB, I was even behind my old PB time here. So, as long as the rest of this run goes good, we're probably going to PB. Now, after this Jack 3 fight, we get to make a choice whether to save Mia or to save Zoe. And there's not much of a choice because, well, for two reasons. If you're following the story of the game, I'm sorry, but you're choosing between saving your wife, who you have been missing for 3 years, and you made the trip all the way down here to get, or you're saving a stranger that you just met a few hours ago. And I'm not saying that, like, you know, you can't be nice, but she is the one that just told you to use the other one on her dad. So I'm just saying that I don't feel like story-wise there's a reason why we would choose Zoe. Even though Mia's been kind of crazy, we've kind of figured out that everybody's kind of got a little something going on with them at this point in the game. It just doesn't make sense to have Zoe as an actual choice there. Speedrun-wise, we don't choose Zoe because she adds an extra boss fight with Mia. It's not very long, but it is adding anything to the run, so it doesn't make sense to do it. Besides that, that's really all that changes. There's some story that changes because of the fact that you did that. Low graphics, yeah. How you doing, Fela? Fela's another one of our great Resident Evil 7 runners. He's done some awesome things in the game. So it's nice to see Phelan in the chat here. But as I was saying, you know, if we choose Zoe, it just, we get a slight change to the story at the end of the game. The end of the game cutscene is just slightly different. It's more just that Mia's missing because you kill her. She actually dies in the game instead of continuing on. Gotcha. I appreciate it, Phil. I always enjoy getting anybody from the community to you know, be in on one of the streams. But yeah, so the other thing that happened is when they put the End of Zoe DLC out, it more or less chose for us that the canon choice is to choose Mia. And it always has felt that way anyways, because none of the game changes. Like, it would have been cool if instead of playing as Mia, we got to play as Zoe and do something different on the ship. That would have made the choice actually matter. But the way that they did it, you choose Zoe, you choose Mia, no matter what, you're going to stay, you're still going to do the exact same ship mission. Like, everything's the same. You wake up as Mia here in a moment instead of being Ethan. Like I said, if choosing Zoe meant that you got to play as Zoe through this and she had to take a different route, you know, do like they did in the original, you know, the old Resident Evil games. I'll go with Resident Evil 2 more specifically, where, you know, playing as Leon first changed Claire's missions from Claire A to Claire B. It just, you know, and vice versa with Leon and Claire. Just doing something like that would have been awesome, I think. But I don't want to talk too much crap about it because I still love the game. I know a lot of runners talk about how much they hate it, but I still love the game. Oh, Ethan. You know, the one thing that is consistent, though, is that Ethan and Mia have the exact same running speed. They don't change that at all, that's for sure. So, one of the things that we're going to do here is, before we start moving after this door opens, we're going to open it first. And the reason for that is that if you open it first and then run in, you get to run straight through the door, as opposed to having to, like, kind of push through the door to get through it. Yeah, I know. Good times, right? But yeah, instead of having to, like, take a couple, like, a little bit of extra time pushing through the door, just standing there and spamming the hell out of the button to open the door actually makes it open quicker. There's another moment of that towards the end of the in the past section, and I'll mention that when we get to it. But ran straight into the molded. The nasty statue of mold that's been left over. So coming into this room, basically once we get to this hard hat, we can spin around and it starts the in the past hallucination that's going on here. And it also, you can tell that a different team worked on this. Localization and everything. One of my favorite lines is coming up here. Is there any weapons on this ship? It's great English. When they made Resident Evil 7, they actually talked about the fact that there were different teams that worked on different parts of the game, and then they kind of wove all of that together. And it's noticeable when you get to the ship, because if you ask anybody that's played this game, this is kind of where the excitement part falls apart a little bit. Not even just talking about speedrunners, just pretty much it seems universal that everyone feels like the ship is the downfall part of this game. I still enjoy it. I still like it. I'll also have to admit that I've nodded off during the ship before because of the fact that it's not as much fun to run as the earlier parts. So, you know, it is what it is. Yeah, like I said, you can definitely tell that it was a different team that did this portion. And I think it would have made things a little more lively if we had a scenario A and scenario B by choosing Mia and Zoe. I think it could have made some things more fun because, you know, besides the fact that it would have given us two different versions of the run, I don't know, just having different things to do and having to memorize the different routes would have been awesome. Yes, I'm saying more work would have been more fun. But, yeah. So, now that we're on the ship, like I said before, we're playing as Mia, and we're gonna get a little backstory here shortly in the form of watching a VHS tape that shows us what was going on before, you know, the 3 years ago when Mia went missing that you get to hear about at the beginning of the game. In fact, in the past section, if you're playing casually, you can even get on the laptop and record that little "I lied to you" speech that she gives. Now, when I just used the fuse there, when I talked back, you know, a few minutes ago when we were at Jack and I was saying I'm menuing over so that I can use the fuse as Mia, that was when that was. There's a lot of planning, you know, for further on when you're doing the run here. Now here, I like to try to get it to where I get the tape in the VHS player before she starts talking. Basically, as I approach that, I just take and start spamming X as soon as I see the icon to pick it up and switch my left thumb over to the other joystick and move it up there. Nothing special, nothing crazy, but it's just kind of how that works. There's a lot of times in the game where like I change over to like a claw grab on the controller too, where I'll have, you know, one or two of my fingers on the button, like on the buttons, the X and circle buttons and stuff, while my thumb's on the joystick. It's really awkward to hold your controller that way, but some of the things in this game kind of require that you do it. At least if you want to be able to move pretty quickly. So, coming into this tape, like I said before, we're 3 years in the past, and we're going to we get the opportunity to witness what happened to the ship, what happened to Mia, how things got out of control. But only kinda and only sorta. We're going to kind of get to witness after Evelyn has gotten loose and running around, and now we're trying to find her and make it stop. Right here, this wonderfully terrible human being that we call Ellen is letting us get some exposition in to find out that there's some sort of imprinting protocol where Mia is not supposed to be targeted by Evelyn. So we're learning that Evelyn is a bioweapon. I mean, not that we didn't know that because it's Resident Evil, but we're learning a little bit, and when I say a little bit, I mean just a little bit about the character. Now, at the start of this run, I made a comment about how using a different language, and in this case Japanese, will cause us to save time over the English version of the game. Or the English dub of the game, I should say, because you can change the language on any version. When she's on that phone call, you notice that there's the little call timer, and literally during one of those phone calls, we get to see that there's one of them is 1 second shorter than it is if you're on English. And that's why we change it to Japanese, is to save that second. I'm sure that there's probably some other time saved by that. If it's gonna happen there, I'm sure that at one of the other moments where we don't have a timer that's like set up already, that the language is probably gonna save some time. But as far as we know for certain, that is all that we save by changing the language. But if it's something as simple as that, why not do it? You know what I mean? You get a second just because you change the language of your game. Hell, for some old games you had to import the Japanese version or whatever to get the language time saves. So here we're going to run on the inside of this because we wouldn't be able to kill him in the first place because of his invincibility frames. And then in addition to that, he doesn't do anything to you. You can get smacked by him, but even if you get smacked by him, it's not a big deal. I didn't kill this guy with that shot, but it makes him just go dumb and he runs into that into that railing back there. It's very specific, the timing that you gotta hit him to make him do that. You can also, if you're doing good, you can try to get a headshot on him as you go through there so you don't have to worry about him at all. It's like I'm 50-50 on whether I get the shot where he just runs into the wall, but even if you do, you can get a headshot as you move through there and it doesn't really change anything. One of the things I've noticed is on this Albert pistol, if you the area that it tends to shoot is like the upper half of where the reticle's at. So as long as you keep things in that area, you'll get a headshot. So back in that room, you'll notice that I like started to walk behind that big pillar thing and then turn right back around. As soon as you walk past the beam, Mia pulls that watch up and it shows it going crazy. That's showing you that you've triggered the next part to load up, and then you can just run out. Right here was another area where I was talking about kind of opening the doors before you move through them. By waiting until she hits the button to cancel that call, right after that you start to move through there. You'll go through the doors without having to wait on them to push open, and where I was standing at was close enough that I didn't lose any time to having to like run up to the doors. So here we're going to try to get a headshot on this guy, and then we want to try to get a headshot on him. I missed that headshot. Like, it looked like I got it. I got a body shot on him. It's just nice because then I don't have to try to get a second headshot here where that watch gets pulled up. No matter what you do, you could be in the middle of aiming, shooting, reloading your gun, it doesn't matter. At that part, every time that watch is going to get pulled up. It's not as big of a deal for us on easy, but if you're running on Madhouse, their movement speed is a lot quicker, so if you can kill them there, it's gonna save you from possibly dying. But I don't run Madhouse because that's a beast that I'm not prepared to take on. And actually, it's really just Mia too. At the beginning of the game is terrible. Like, as bad as I was talking about being at it on easy, I'm terrible at it on Madhouse. So here we're going to go up and we're going to witness one of the best cutscenes in the game, and I'll probably kind of let it play out a little bit because, well, not cutscenes, but in-game cutscenes in the game. And I'm going to let it play out a little bit without saying as much during it just because I love it so much. So earlier I was talking about Alan and how he's like the most wonderfully terrible character ever. Like I can't stand Alan. I think he's just bad. And it's like I got this deep-seated hatred for him back when before I even like was running the game actually. That because I spent 1 week where I was just casually playing this, and then I decided I wanted to try to run it. And in that time, his English actor, I just hate Alan so much. Like, he just made me hate him so much. So getting to watch this, getting to see his demise, it always makes me happy because I just can't stand him. So we're just going to watch and enjoy this for a moment. Goodbye, Alan. It's just a good day. It's a good day when Alan dies. So, as we come back up and we're seeing Mia, we're noticing that her arms are covered in molded, the nasty molded material. This is the time that Mia is infected with the molded. And remember, this is 3 years in the past from where the current events of the game are happening. Now back there, that laptop, when I was saying earlier that if you were playing casually, you could go through and play out that recording, that was where it was. You could have done it right there. But it adds like 45 seconds to your run, so no, not gonna happen. Now right there, we have the only cutscene in the game that you're able to skip, and it's important that you skip that cutscene because while it plays out, the in-game timer continues to move forward. Being on console, we also have time that we're going to lose during this load time, and it doesn't make any sense because every other time that you have this load time, from animation to animation or like earlier in the game, at the very beginning of the game, we don't lose that time. that much time to when things are loading in, but this is a pretty significant change. It's like 30 seconds that we lose just during this load time. If you leave the movie, that cutscene go, you lose like an extra 45 seconds on top of that. It sucks. And the other part is for just trying to get through the game and stuff. Even if that cutscene didn't cause you to lose your in-game time, you still have to wait on this entire load to happen after the movie's over with. So it just extends this run. It's kind of, yeah. So now they're kind of pretending like Mia remembers everything that was going on with her. They kind of do, but they kind of allude that she's still clueless. There's a lot to that that's just weird. Earlier in the game, like when you first get your hand not chopped off in this version of the game, but normally get your hand chopped off, you get to hear her character talking about like what her job is and stuff. It says like, I have to stop the spread and blah blah blah. It's like, so she knows what's going on, but like she has no idea when she's talking to Ethan what's going on. I think she's super sketchy, but that's just me. So once upon a long time ago, I was doing a speedrun race, and in this section you come up that ladder, you grab this lug wrench from in here, and I just thinking about it realized that I forgot the menu for this lug wrench again. It's 2 runs in a row I forgot to do this. But anyways, you grab this lug wrench, you drop down here, and then you use it on this hatch right here. But in a race a long time ago, I dropped down, and instead of using that lug wrench, it was like very late, I was very tired, I decided to climb that ladder again and then run all the way back around. And as I was coming back towards the captain's room up there, I realized what was going on and turned back towards the elevator and went back down. That lost me about 45 seconds, and in that race, I lost that race by 1 second. Alright, well, that was unfortunate. I thought I was going to block it there. So normally you want to just try to block that hit really quick and then you can run around him. Actually taking the hit like I did there just adds like a half a second to your time. Not ideal, but it is, apparently that time it was inevitable. That's why you don't want to just try to run around him, because you'll still get blocked just the same, and then you have to deal with that half-second time loss in addition to that. So here we're already menued so that we can use this corrosive, and by using it, it's going to kind of push us through that molded. We don't have to try to get around them. The only thing that we've got now is that on our way back through, he can sometimes stand right in the doorway and kind of impede your progress. That's really obnoxious, I'm not gonna lie. So we're gonna come in here and we're gonna try and get this cable. Once you press the button to start unscrewing the cable from the connection, you can hit the back button and it lets you kind of move around and do things while the animation's happening. It kind of lets you just set up so that you can get ready for that quick turn. But by doing all of that quickly, that fat molded I'd even go 99 times out of 100 just kind of stands in that position, so you don't have to worry about him being in your way. On the rare occasion, he gets in your way and you end up losing a good amount of time because of it. But fortunately, when we got back to the door, that molded was not in our way, which is awesome. And then all of our menuing was ready so that I could use the cable as soon as we got to that, and then press right 1 time to be able to use the fuse that we picked up earlier. We're going to keep these, and we end up giving those the tissue samples to Ethan here in a moment, and that's what we're going to use to make the neurotoxin at the end of the game. So at the end of this way, we're going to try to get around this guy without getting hit. It doesn't happen very easily most times. That was actually quite lucky. And we're going to pray that this guy jumps back into the right. He didn't do it, but it didn't lose us a lot of time. So right here, this box being there actually can cause you to get caught up kind of bad. If this fat molded doesn't come out like he did here, sometimes he'll just stand next to that box. And if the box isn't there, which like on 100% you can shoot that box when you're walking up to it so it won't be there. If the fat molded just stays in that spot, you can run around him. But in any percent where you don't have a gun when you get there, it'll block you and you have to wait so that the fat molded gets out of the way. If you try to run straight up to him to try to like push past him, he can't really be moved over, so you have to wait till he starts moving forward, and usually he hits you or like spews acid on you or whatever, and you just kind of get delayed. Normally what you want to do is when you get up around there, you just stand for a second and then he comes out. It's kind of the more ideal way to handle him being in the way. So one of the things that I think is fun, and I talk about when I get to this area, is that Jack, when this light is on him, the only areas of his body that cast a shadow are areas that you can see his skin. So his hands, wrists, his neck, like the upper part of his chest, and his face, like his head. That's the only thing, if you look behind here, that's casting a shadow. And then on top of that, when his shadows cast, they don't just cast on the object that's directly behind it. It'll cast the shadow on his shirt, on the chair, and on the wall all at the same time. It's like a little bit of a programming miss there. Or a lighting miss, I don't know exactly. I'm sure it's probably whoever put the lighting in. Maybe it's because, I don't know, maybe the shirt doesn't have, is like, I don't know. Maybe it's just like a non-contact kind of thing. But it's something interesting, kind of silly that I've noticed, and I tend to make a comment on when I get to this part, especially when I'm commentating on a run, as fully as I am today. So if you're actually, paying attention to the story here, this is like super sad to find out that like Jack and Marguerite and the whole family, they're sort of trapped. Like their normal conscious is trapped in with this need to kill and do bad things. So like obviously Jack's still like right there. He shows us that he's still human and that he's normal, but he has to deal with not being able to control himself. And one of the things that we've learned since the Zoe DLC comes out is part of the reason why we get to see the both of them there is that they're both still alive. Even though we stabbed him with the thing that heals him, he's still infected, but he's somehow between here and I think it's 3 weeks later is when End of Zoe happens. He's infected with like the white molded stuff. If you've not played the DLCs at all, then there's a different type of molded that Lucas is dealing with because he's actually an operative for I can't remember what their name is. It's the something, and I can't remember what the hell the name of them is. But that's how much they push the story in this game, is that I can't even remember like the main company that we're going against here. Oh, gotta love that. But anyways, Jack gets infected by that white molded variant, and he's and this is all kinds of spoilers. I've already said it, so it's not like I'm gonna not ruin anything more now. But you find out that he's still alive, and you're fighting him in the End of Zoe DLC. It's a good time. So during this little area where we're going through the water, there's only a couple little tricks that you can do because you don't really have, it's all movement stuff here. By trying to stay to the right side, you don't go out into the water and slow yourself down. By getting that slight, quick little movement up, by kind of going up that branch, you move a little faster. And then by staying as far to the left while we enter the water as you can possibly stand, you go a little faster because you stay above the water longer. And obviously once we got in the water, our movement speed has gone down quite a bit. So those are just a couple like little movement based tricks that you can do to get through that area just a slight bit quicker. When we come in here, we're going to pick up this grenade launcher, and then all we need are just some of our items we've been using throughout the game now. We're going to switch this over to Neuro rounds because we don't have any use for the flame rounds from here on. Neuro rounds will do more damage and do what we need them to do. Now, normally I try to get headshots on all three of them. As long as I get to press that button, I don't really care if I get hit by this other guy because it's not going to affect anything for me. So, the only thing that it can do is it has the potential to knock you out of your animation for the button, and after you press it, it's just kind of getting you out of it quicker. You more or less just have extra time to stand there and wait on the elevator door to open. It's really all that it does. So, it's not anything crazy. Usually I'm a little closer on having that in the right spot, but I missed it that time. Alright, now here I'm going to look down because a molded, one of the crawlers is going to spawn, and his invincibility frames are pretty much on all the way until the point where I just shot him and killed him, and it let us go through him without having any slowdown. Usually if you hit his invincibility frames, you'll either run right into him and it causes you to slow down because you're being, you're not able to pass him, or he'll smack you on your way through and you'll lose like a half a second to a second, depending on which kind of ouch animation the game decides to play for you. So as we push this down the railway here, we're gonna just shoot this wall. It's gonna take care of that molded there. You don't have to do it. I choose to for the sake of just not getting smacked. I've had it happen in the past, but 9 times out of 10 it won't. Sometimes there's a crawler that will pop in behind him and it can hit you and make you go slower. Again, these are things that don't happen often, but I have the kind of luck where it would happen to me if I didn't try to mitigate the problem. So here we're going to put the tissue samples I was telling you about earlier into the box, and through amazing technology it's going to turn all of that into a neurotoxin that will allow us to destroy Evelyn. Now, earlier I was talking about the retries and how they affect your movement speed. In the early part of the game, in the guest house where we use the 2 retries, it's not easily able to be seen how significant that speed is. But if you pay attention to my movement speed right now, once we do this retry here, this is the last one that we use. There we go. I was like a slight half step too far behind it. But once we come back from this retry, this one you'll see a very significant difference. This is kind of like the outdoor movement speed instead of the indoor movement speed that we get set to max on. Because for some reason in this game, when you're in big open areas, you run faster than when you're in tight little spaces where there's people trying to kill you. Like if you're in a big outdoor open area where there's nothing near you, you're running full sprint. The rest of the time, you're more or less doing what we like to refer to as speed walking. That's what Ethan does. He speed walks. Now, all of that's pretty much set up for us. It's pretty easy to get those shots, but it's also really easy to mess them up. So earlier I was talking about needing to have the neuro rounds in the gun, and this is why. As we come through here, we take that shot, and the neuro rounds effectively just stun lock those 2 fat moldeds. If we don't get them, right about here, they'll spew acid on us as we're climbing up, and it knocks us off the ladder, and you can lose anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute, depending on how quick you are at recovery. You can lose even more time than that, honestly. And that's on easy mode. If you're on Madhouse, there's all kinds of things that you have to deal with on Madhouse, because there's trip mines on that ladder on Madhouse. So the whole run, yeah, Yes, it does. You do lose your entire run if you have that happen there. It sucks. So after all that, we're gonna have some hallucinations, and the reason why is we're infected. When we were in the little molded cocoon thing, that was Ethan getting infected by the molded. And the reason why I say that is that in the story, if you read enough, if you get through all the files and read enough, you'll find out that part of what happens is once you're infected, Evelyn can make you see these hallucinations, and it's part of what like gives her the ability to control people, I guess. So we're getting to relive some of these flashback moments from the beginning of the game. Just this whole section is kind of like a hallucination. We're not actually seeing anything that's totally real other than that we're in the guest house. So I know when I have an enemy that's super powerful and has the ability to control my mind, I always show it that I'm going to stab it with something that can kill it. Maybe she would have embraced us when we got upstairs instead of blasting us with, you know, wind power. Now, when I walked in there, I kind of took a slight dip to the left, and that just kept Mia from getting in the way of... sometimes she'll block you from getting to the stairs quickly. So as Evelyn does this first blast, you want to block it, and then as we walk in, we're going to kind of go at an angle. And the reason for that is we were able to do a one-cycle blast where we only got hit, you know, had to block that first one. No matter what, that's always going to be a thing. But by coming in at that angle and looking at Evelyn as we approached her, it both allowed us to kind of bypass the force that would be pushing straight on us and set us up so that we're staring into the area that the animation's going to start in, so we lose like no time. We used to have what was called the bomb strat, where you would pick a bomb up on the ship, and as you would run straight at her, you would put the bomb down, and then you would blow yourself, like you would blow it up behind you to force you through one of her air blasts as you approached her to guarantee that you would get the one cycle. I was terrible at it, and I would always blow it up at the wrong time, and it would make me go backwards and just lose like 10 plus seconds. I spent a lot of time just trying different movement-based things and found that version of that area, and it's so much easier to just have to move around and do the little angled run and all that. It's just ridiculously easy compared to actually having to use the bomb. So as you see, we're in the final boss fight here. It's the hardest boss fight you'll ever see in any game ever of all time. Ever. We stand there and with a saw, and then here I'm gonna shoot her, but I don't have to. It's just more fun if we do. It just makes it feel like it's going quicker. If you actually look at video side by side of somebody shooting her and doing all that, and then not doing all the gunfire and stuff, it takes exactly the same amount of time for all of this to happen. The only thing that is important before we get to the final gun is that we quickly get out of this hold that she has, which you take the saw and you hit that little tentacle thing that's on your leg, which immediately drops you. If you're not quick with that, she'll like slap you twice with her other tentacles, and then after that you get to drop. So that can cause you to slow down if you're not quick with it, but it's kind of hard to miss it on New Game Plus. So here, I'm not going to move my camera or anything like that. We're just spamming, absolutely spamming the trigger button. And those 4 shots from not moving the camera will kill her every time. All those additional shots and all that were just me enjoying shooting Evelyn a whole bunch. But as for the sake of RTA, when the screen goes black, that's when we would call the run over with. And then we'll see what I've got. I believe I probably have a PB time here. So we'll see if that's going to happen. Don't know, but we'll find out. I guess I could actually hit the buttons to skip the stuff. Woo! Hell yeah. That makes me super happy. My goal has been to get below 1:30:45, and obviously I have now made that by 8 seconds. I've PB'd past my goal by 8 seconds. That's 13-second PB time with a mediocre guest house and missing Jack 2. So that's great. I'm pretty excited about having that happen right there. Thank you, Phelan and Sans Envy. I appreciate that very much. Yeah, that makes me super excited, and it puts me pretty close to the next goal that I had in my list of what my goals would be. 1:30:45 was my big one because I just kept making bad mistakes, and 1:30:30 is the next one. I'm not in any rush to try to hit that 1:29 time like Ross is. World record is awesome, but I know that I got to take my baby steps to get there, and I am super excited about